Before we begin, make yourself comfortable. Find a position that allows your body to rest completely. Your eyes can gently close, your breath slowing as you listen, not to learn so much as to receive. This time is for you. No pressure to remember every detail. No test waiting at the end. Just a quiet space for understanding something important about the human mind and heart. As we move through this talk, we'll explore what makes a personality healthy or disordered, and along the way, you might recognize patterns in yourself or people you know. That's okay. Just let the information wash over you gently. Have you ever met someone whose behavior seems unpredictable, manipulative, or emotionally extreme? And you wondered, is that just their personality or something deeper? Tonight, as you relax and unwind, we're going to explore the difference between a normal personality and a personality disordered one. We'll break it down through psychology, real-world examples, and clear comparisons that help you see these differences in action. By the end of this journey, you'll understand not only how personality disorders develop and show up, but also how healthy personalities think, feel, and relate differently. So settle in deeper now, and let's begin this exploration together. To begin, we need to understand what psychologists mean by personality. Personality is the consistent pattern of how we think, feel, and behave across different situations and over time. It shapes how we respond to challenges, handle emotions, form relationships, and see ourselves in the world. Think of your personality as your psychological fingerprint. It's what makes you uniquely you. It influences whether you're more outgoing or reserved, whether you approach new situations with excitement or caution, and how you deal with stress and conflict. A normal or healthy personality is relatively flexible. It adapts to change, maintains stable self-esteem, and balances personal needs with social expectations. Imagine a tree that bends in the wind but doesn't break. That's what psychological flexibility looks like. In contrast, a disordered personality is rigid and maladaptive. Its patterns of thinking and behaving are so inflexible that they cause significant distress or harm to the individual or others. It's like a tree that's become so stiff, it snaps under pressure rather than swaying with it. Personality disorders aren't simply quirks or eccentricities. They are enduring patterns of inner experience and behavior that deviate markedly from cultural expectations. And they often start early in life, sometimes in adolescence or early adulthood. Think of personality as a spectrum, from adaptive and flexible on one end to rigid and dysfunctional on the other. Healthy personality traits exist in everyone. For example, being detail-oriented might help you succeed at work or school. You notice things others miss. You're thorough, and you take pride in accuracy. But when that same trait becomes extreme, such as obsessively controlling every tiny detail to the point where you can't finish projects or maintain relationships, it can cross into the territory of a disorder like obsessive-compulsive personality disorder. So, the difference isn't black and white. It's about degree, rigidity, and impact. It's not that one person has traits and another doesn't. It's that the intensity and inflexibility of those traits determine whether they help or hinder someone's life. The line between healthy and unhealthy isn't always clear-cut, but understanding where that line roughly exists can help us navigate our own behaviors and better understand others. For perspective, the percentage of people with diagnosable personality disorders in the United States is estimated to be from 10 to 15%. This is a slightly higher percentage than in other countries. According to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, personality disorders are grouped into 3 clusters, each with distinct themes. Don't worry about memorizing these. Just let the patterns wash over you. The first cluster includes odd or eccentric behaviors. This cluster includes paranoid personality disorder, where someone is deeply suspicious of others' motives; schizoid personality disorder, marked by detachment from social relationships; and schizotypal personality disorder, which involves unusual beliefs and perceptions. The second cluster includes dramatic, emotional, or erratic behaviors. This is perhaps the cluster most people have heard about. It includes borderline personality disorder, characterized by intense emotional swings and fear of abandonment; narcissistic personality disorder, involving grandiosity and need for admiration; antisocial personality disorder, marked by disregard for others' rights; and histrionic personality disorder, featuring excessive emotionality and attention-seeking. The third cluster includes anxious or fearful behaviors. This cluster contains avoidant personality disorder, where someone fears rejection so much they avoid social situations; dependent personality disorder, involving excessive need to be taken care of; and obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, characterized by perfectionism and control. Each has unique characteristics, but they all share key traits: a distorted self-image, difficulties in regulating emotions, troubled interpersonal relationships, and an inability to adapt behavioral patterns when circumstances change. Before we compare normal and disordered personalities, let's describe what healthy personality functioning actually looks like, according to modern psychology and personality research. A normal or well-adjusted individual typically shows several key characteristics. First, they have a stable self-identity. They know who they are, what they value, and what they want. When you ask them about their beliefs or goals, they can articulate them clearly. They might change their mind sometimes, but their core sense of self remains relatively consistent. Second, they demonstrate empathy and perspective-taking. They can see and respect other people's experiences. Even when they disagree with someone, they can understand why that person might feel differently. They ask themselves, how would I feel in their shoes? Third, they practice emotional regulation. They manage mood swings and frustration in constructive ways. Sure, they get angry or sad or anxious, but they don't stay stuck in those emotions indefinitely. They can talk themselves down from extreme feelings and find healthy ways to cope. Fourth, they show accountability. They accept responsibility for mistakes rather than deflecting blame. When they mess up, they can say, I was wrong, or I could have handled that better, without their entire sense of self-crumbling. Fifth, they demonstrate flexibility. They adjust when things don't go their way. Plans change, disappointments happen, and they adapt. They might be upset initially, but they can roll with life's punches. And finally, they form secure attachments. They can create relationships built on trust and mutual respect. Their relationships have a give and take quality, where both people feel valued and heard. Notice that nothing here implies perfection. Healthy personalities feel anger, jealousy, and insecurity too. But they recognize and manage these emotions rather than being ruled by them. They stumble, they have bad days, but they can course correct. As you listen, you might recognize some of these traits in yourself, and that's comforting. You might also recognize areas where you'd like to grow, and that's perfectly normal too. Let's examine side by side how these differences show up in daily life. Understanding these contrasts helps clarify what we mean when we talk about personality disorders. When faced with criticism, a person with a healthy personality might feel hurt or defensive initially, but they can step back, consider if the criticism has merit, and either make changes or decide the criticism isn't valid. Either way, they process it and move on. A person with narcissistic personality disorder, however, might experience criticism as a devastating attack on their entire being. They might rage, blame the critic, or completely dismiss the feedback without any self-reflection. Their fragile ego can't absorb any perceived flaw. In relationships, someone with a normal personality can maintain boundaries while staying connected. They don't lose themselves in relationships, but they also don't wall themselves off completely. They experience intimacy without overwhelming fear or neediness. Someone with borderline personality disorder might swing between extremes, clinging desperately to avoid abandonment one day, then pushing people away the next when they feel engulfed. Their emotions about relationships are intense and unstable, swinging from "you're perfect" to "you're terrible," based on small triggers. When dealing with rules and social norms, a well-adjusted person generally follows them because they understand social contracts benefit everyone. They might occasionally bend rules, but they experience guilt or conscience when they do harm. Someone with antisocial personality disorder shows a consistent pattern of disregarding and violating others' rights. They might lie, manipulate, or harm others without remorse. They lack the internal moral compass that guides most people's behavior. In handling stress, a normal personality might feel overwhelmed temporarily, but can reach out for support, use coping strategies, and eventually regain equilibrium. A person with a personality disorder might become completely dysregulated under stress, engaging in self-destructive behaviors, lashing out at others, or spiraling into a crisis that seems disproportionate to the stressor. The pattern becomes clear. It's not about whether someone experiences difficult emotions or challenges. It's about whether they can navigate those experiences with some flexibility and self-awareness. Imagine two employees, Alex and Jordan, and watch how they each handle a challenging situation. Both Alex and Jordan are part of a team working on an important project. The project fails. Maybe they miss a deadline, lose a client, or deliver work that doesn't meet expectations. Alex has a healthy personality. When the project fails, Alex feels disappointed and frustrated. Maybe there's some self-doubt. Could I have done more? Alex takes a day or two to process the emotions, then reflects on what went wrong. Was it poor planning? Communication breakdown? Unrealistic expectations? Alex reaches out to team members to discuss what happened. In the conversation, Alex takes responsibility for their part. I should have flagged that issue earlier, but also recognizes it was a team effort, not just one person's fault. Together, they brainstorm solutions for next time. Alex learns from the experience and moves forward. Jordan, however, displays traits of narcissistic personality disorder. When the same project fails, Jordan's reaction is entirely different. Jordan immediately denies any fault. "This wasn't my responsibility," Jordan insists, even though they were clearly involved. Jordan blames coworkers by name. "If Sarah had just done her job right," or "Marcus always drops the ball." If anyone suggests Jordan could have contributed to the problem, Jordan becomes hostile or dismissive. "I can't believe you're coming after me when I'm the only one who actually worked hard on this." Beneath that arrogance lies a fragile self-image that can't handle criticism. To Jordan, admitting any mistake feels like admitting they're worthless. So the ego constructs elaborate defenses: denial, blame, and sometimes outright fabrication. The situation looks similar on the surface, a failed project, but their internal worlds, coping mechanisms, and responses differ profoundly. And over time, these patterns affect Jordan's career, as colleagues learn they can't trust Jordan to be a true team player. Let's take another example, this time in the realm of relationships. Taylor and Riley both enter new romantic relationships. Taylor, with a normal personality, feels excitement, but also recognizes boundaries. There's the thrill of getting to know someone new, the butterflies, the hope that this might develop into something meaningful. But Taylor also maintains their own identity. They still see friends, pursue hobbies, and don't abandon their own life. When disagreements arise, and they always do in relationships, Taylor can communicate openly. "I felt hurt when you said that," or "Can we talk about what happened?" Taylor respects the other person's autonomy. If their partner needs space or has different opinions, Taylor doesn't interpret that as rejection. They understand that two people can be close while still being individuals. Riley, who has traits of borderline personality disorder, experiences relationships very differently. When Riley meets someone new, the emotions are incredibly intense. This person seems perfect, like the answer to everything. Riley wants to spend every moment together, texts constantly, and might say, "I love you," after only a few dates. But this idealization is fragile. Small arguments feel catastrophic. If their partner doesn't text back quickly, Riley spirals. "They don't care about me. They're going to leave. I knew this would happen." The fear of abandonment is overwhelming. Riley's self-image depends heavily on their partner's reactions. When things are good, Riley feels worthwhile. When there's conflict, Riley feels worthless. This leads to cycles of closeness and withdrawal, desperately clinging one day, pushing away the next. Riley might engage in impulsive behaviors to manage the overwhelming emotions, showing up unannounced, making dramatic gestures, or even threatening self-harm if the partner tries to leave. This emotional volatility isn't intentional manipulation. It's the result of profound inner instability. Riley genuinely experiences these intense, shifting emotions, but the impact on relationships is severe, as partners feel exhausted, confused, and sometimes trapped. Recognizing this distinction helps us approach such individuals With both compassion and boundaries, Riley is suffering, but that doesn't mean others should sacrifice their own well-being trying to stabilize someone who needs professional help. You might be wondering how someone develops a personality disorder. Why do some people end up with these rigid, maladaptive patterns while others don't? Personality disorders emerge from a complex mix of factors. It's never just one thing, but rather multiple influences interacting over time. Genetic predispositions play a role. Studies show heritability plays a moderate role in personality disorders. If you have a biological parent with certain traits, you may be more vulnerable to developing similar patterns. But genes aren't destiny. They're just one piece of the puzzle. Early childhood environment is crucial. Abuse, neglect, or inconsistent caregiving can impair emotional regulation and attachment. A child who experiences trauma might develop hypervigilance, difficulty trusting others, or intense fear of abandonment. If caregivers are unpredictable, loving one moment, harsh the next, the child never learns what to expect, leading to anxiety and instability. Temperament matters too. Some children are naturally more sensitive or reactive, increasing vulnerability. A highly sensitive child in a chaotic environment might develop personality disorder traits, while a more resilient child in the same environment might not. Social learning influences development. Modeling from caregivers influences how one interprets relationships and trust. If you watch your parents handle conflict through rage or silent treatment rather than healthy communication, those become your templates for relationships. Biological factors also contribute. Differences in brain function related to emotion and impulse control can play a part. Brain imaging studies show that people with certain personality disorders have differences in areas responsible for emotional regulation, empathy, and impulse control. Importantly, personality disorders tend to solidify by early adulthood, though they can evolve with therapy and self-awareness. The patterns become deeply ingrained, automatic ways of thinking, feeling, and behaving that feel normal to the person, even if they cause problems. But here's something hopeful. These patterns, while stubborn, aren't completely fixed. With the right intervention and willingness to change, people can develop healthier ways of relating to themselves and others. Living with a personality disorder can lead to serious difficulties that ripple through every area of life. Chronic relationship conflict is perhaps the most visible cost. Whether it's romantic relationships, friendships, or family connections, patterns keep repeating. People with personality disorders often report feeling lonely and misunderstood, yet their own behaviors push others away. They might go through relationship after relationship, each following the same painful script. Employment instability is common. Difficulty with authority figures, inability to work in teams, or emotional outbursts can lead to job loss. Even talented individuals might struggle to maintain careers because they can't navigate workplace dynamics or handle feedback. Feelings of emptiness or alienation plague many people with personality disorders. There's often a sense of not knowing who they really are, feeling hollow inside, or believing they don't fit anywhere. This existential pain is profound and persistent. Substance use or impulsive behaviors often emerge as attempts to regulate emotions. When internal distress becomes unbearable, people turn to anything that provides temporary relief: alcohol, drugs, binge eating, risky sexual behavior, reckless driving, or spending sprees. These behaviors create new problems while failing to address the underlying pain. High rates of anxiety, depression, and self-harm accompany personality disorders. The rigid patterns that define these disorders often generate their own misery. Someone with avoidant personality disorder becomes depressed from isolation. Someone with borderline traits might engage in self-harm when emotions become overwhelming. Without treatment, the behaviors often repeat because the person has trouble seeing the patterns as problematic. They perceive others as the cause. Everyone else is the problem becomes the explanatory framework, preventing insight and change. This is why understanding and treatment are so important. The suffering is real, even if the person can't initially see their own role in perpetuating it. Now, let's shift our focus and consider how a normal personality responds when life gets overwhelming. Because here's the truth: healthy personalities struggle too. They experience stress, setbacks, disappointments, and crises. A normal personality doesn't mean immunity from difficulty. The difference lies in recovery and resilience. A balanced individual may feel angry, anxious, or insecure after a major setback, losing a job, going through a breakup, experiencing a health scare, or facing financial hardship. Those feelings are valid and intense. They might need to vent to friends, cry, take time off, or sit with uncomfortable emotions. They might question themselves or feel temporarily hopeless. But after processing those emotions, whether that takes days or weeks, they regain perspective. They can step back and see the situation more clearly. They recognize what they can control and what they can't. They identify lessons learned and consider next steps. They grow from the experience. Even painful situations become opportunities for developing wisdom, strength, or empathy. A personality disordered individual, by contrast, often becomes stuck in repetitive cycles, unable to self-regulate or integrate lessons from experience. The same triggers produce the same reactions over and over. Years later, they're still responding to abandonment fears, criticism, or stress in the exact same dysfunctional ways. There's no evolution, no learning from experience. The healthy personality bends under pressure, but springs back. The disordered personality either remains rigid until it breaks, or repeatedly breaks in the same place. As you rest and listen, you might reflect on your own patterns. How do you typically respond to stress? Do you eventually regain equilibrium, or do you find yourself stuck in the same loops? This self-awareness is the beginning of growth. One crucial difference between normal and disordered personalities is empathy, the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. Healthy individuals can consider how their actions affect others and adjust accordingly. They think, if I say this, how will they feel? Or, my behavior hurt them, even though that wasn't my intention. I should apologize. This doesn't mean they always get it right, but there's an attempt to understand others' perspectives and to care about their impact. Disordered individuals may lack empathy, either due to emotional detachment, as in antisocial personality disorder, or overwhelming self-focus, as in narcissistic or borderline patterns. However, empathy deficits vary across disorders, and this is important to understand. Someone with antisocial personality disorder might lack empathy in a cognitive way. They literally don't feel bad when others suffer. They can recognize that someone is upset and may even be highly skilled at predicting the emotional response of others. But others' emotional reactions do not move them emotionally. This is sometimes called cold empathy. Narcissistic personalities are often emotionally blind to others' pain because they're so focused on maintaining their own image. They might not even notice when they've hurt someone because they're too busy managing their own ego. Borderline individuals present a different picture. They may be too emotionally attuned, sensing rejection even when none exists. They might feel others' emotions intensely, but interpret them through the lens of their own fears. So, they're not exactly lacking empathy. Instead, their empathy is distorted by their internal chaos. Understanding these differences helps us interact more effectively. You wouldn't approach someone who can't feel empathy the same way you'd approach someone whose empathy is confused and overwhelming. Here's some good news. Personality disorders are treatable, though not in the quick, take-a-pill sense that works for some other conditions. There's no medication that directly treats personality disorders, though medications can help with symptoms like depression or anxiety that often accompany them. Psychotherapy is the cornerstone of treatment. This isn't just chatting about your week. It's intensive, structured work that targets the core patterns of thinking and behaving. Several approaches have shown effectiveness. Dialectical behavior therapy, or DBT, was originally developed for borderline personality disorder, but is now used more broadly. It teaches skills in 4 key areas: mindfulness, distress tolerance, emotion regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness. Patients learn to observe their emotions without being controlled by them, to tolerate discomfort without impulsive reactions, and to navigate relationships more skillfully. Schema therapy identifies and changes deeply held beliefs about oneself and others, beliefs formed in childhood that no longer serve the person. If you grew up believing, "I'm unlovable," or "people will always abandon me," schema therapy helps you recognize these beliefs, understand their origins, and develop healthier alternatives. Mentalization-based therapy helps individuals understand their own and others' mental states. It strengthens the ability to reflect on thoughts and feelings. Why did I react that way? What might they have been thinking? Building the foundation for better relationships and self-understanding. These therapies help individuals identify self-defeating patterns, build emotional regulation skills, strengthen empathy and self-reflection, and develop a more stable sense of identity. Progress requires persistence, but can lead to meaningful improvement over time. We're talking months to years of consistent work, not a quick fix. But many people with personality disorders do learn to manage their symptoms and build healthier relationships. They might not be completely cured, the underlying tendencies may always be there, but they can develop tools to recognize and manage them. It's like having a chronic condition that can be managed with the right approach. The key is willingness to engage in treatment and do the hard work of change. That's often the biggest hurdle, because personality disorders typically involve limited insight into one's own patterns. If you ever find yourself interacting closely with a personality disordered person, perhaps a coworker, family member, or partner, understanding the dynamics can protect your own well-being. This isn't about diagnosing people or labeling them, but if you recognize these patterns in someone close to you, here are some guiding principles. Set clear boundaries. Be consistent and calm when enforcing them. Don't waver or make exceptions because you feel guilty or pressured. If you say, "I won't continue this conversation if you yell at me," follow through by ending the conversation if yelling occurs. Avoid emotional escalation. Don't get drawn into power struggles, dramatic confrontations, or attempts to prove who's right. You cannot win these battles, and engaging only drains your energy. Stay calm, don't take the bait, and disengage when necessary. Don't personalize their reactions. Remember, the behavior stems from deep psychological patterns, not necessarily from you. If someone with narcissistic traits rages at you, it's not really about you. It's about their inability to handle perceived criticism. This perspective helps you maintain emotional distance. Encourage professional help, but don't try to diagnose or fix them yourself. You can say, "I think talking to a therapist could really help you," or "Have you considered counseling?" But you can't force them, and you shouldn't take on the therapist role yourself. Prioritize self-care. Emotional exhaustion is common when dealing with chronic instability. Make sure you have your own support system. Engage in activities that replenish you, and don't sacrifice your mental health trying to manage someone else's disorder. Sometimes, the healthiest choice is to limit contact or end the relationship entirely. That's not cruel. It's recognizing that you can't help someone who won't help themselves, and you deserve peace. One misconception is that disordered means bad or dangerous. In truth, these individuals are often suffering profoundly. Think about it. Imagine living with intense emotional pain you can't regulate, fears of abandonment that feel life-threatening, or an inability to maintain close relationships despite desperately wanting them. That's the daily reality for many people with personality disorders. They're not villains in a story. They're human beings, struggling with psychological patterns they didn't choose and often can't see clearly enough to change on their own. Cultural attitudes also shape how disorders are perceived. Traits that look maladaptive in one society might be valued in another. Extreme independence, emotional restraint, or even mild paranoia might be adaptive in environments where trust is dangerous or self-reliance is necessary for survival. What looks like avoidant personality disorder in a culture that values social connection might look like appropriate caution in a culture with different norms. This doesn't mean personality disorders aren't real, but it reminds us that context matters. The manual we use is written from a Western, primarily American, perspective. Other cultures might understand personality and pathology differently. The goal isn't to label people, but to understand patterns that limit human growth and connection. Labels can be useful for treatment and understanding, but they can also become stigmatizing if we're not careful. The person is more than their diagnosis. They have strengths, hopes, and the capacity for change. The disorder is something they experience, not all of who they are. When we understand that a personality disorder reflects a stuck pattern, not a moral failing, we can approach the topic with compassion rather than judgment. These aren't bad people making bad choices out of malice. These are people whose developmental experiences, biology, and environment combined to create maladaptive patterns that now feel normal to them. Imagine personality as a house. The healthy personality has rooms built with windows and doors that open freely. It breathes. Air circulates, light comes in, and people can move between spaces comfortably. Sure, some doors might stick occasionally, and maybe a window needs repair, but overall, the structure is sound and functional. The disordered personality has walls that are too thick, or corridors that twist back on themselves. Some rooms have no windows at all. They're dark and stuffy. Doors might be locked from the inside, or they open into walls. The person living there feels trapped, confused, and isolated, but they've never known anything different. Therapy helps reopen those windows, introducing light where rigidity once reigned. It's about creating doorways where there were only walls, ventilation where there was stagnation. It's renovation work, slow, difficult, but ultimately transformative. This metaphor helps us hold both truths. Yes, personality disorders cause real harm and dysfunction. And yes, the people experiencing them deserve compassion and support toward healing. So, what truly separates a personality disordered individual from a normal one? It's not just intensity of emotion or unusual behavior. Plenty of healthy people feel intensely and behave in unique ways. It's not just having problems or struggling. Everyone faces challenges and makes mistakes. The real difference is the inability to adapt, the rigidity of patterns, and the distorted sense of self and others. A normal personality bends without breaking. When life pushes, it gives a little, absorbs the impact, and returns to center. When it does break, because sometimes even healthy personalities break under extreme stress, it can heal and integrate the experience. A disordered personality repeats the same painful loops, unable to self-correct. It breaks in the same places, over and over, or it becomes so rigid, trying not to break, that it can't move at all. But here's the important part. Every personality lies somewhere on the spectrum. We all have traits that could become extreme under the right or wrong circumstances. We all have patterns we fall into, blind spots we don't see, and areas where we struggle to be flexible. Understanding personality disorders isn't about creating an us versus them divide. It's about understanding human psychology in all its complexity, the ways we can get stuck and the ways we can grow. With awareness, empathy, and treatment, even deeply ingrained habits can evolve toward health and wholeness. Change is possible. Healing is possible. Growth is possible. Our understanding of personality isn't about labeling. It's about learning how we relate, heal, and grow. The more we study these differences, the better we can nurture compassion for both others and ourselves, because ultimately, we're all trying to navigate life with the psychological tools we've been given. Some of us received better tools than others. Some of us have had to build new tools along the way. But we're all on this journey of becoming more fully human. If this information helped you better understand the complexities of personality, consider how you might use this knowledge with compassion toward others who struggle and toward yourself in the areas where you face challenges. Education is the first step toward empathy, and empathy is what bridges the gap between normal and disordered. It's what allows us to see the suffering behind difficult behaviors and to hold appropriate boundaries while still maintaining our humanity. As you drift toward sleep now, let go of any judgments about others or about yourself. We're all works in progress, all learning to be more flexible, more self-aware, more connected. The words are fading now, becoming softer, like echoes in a peaceful valley. Let sleep come whenever it wishes. Let your consciousness gently dissolve into rest. You are safe. You are enough. You belong to this human family with all its complexity and beauty. Rest well. Good night.